Hello, hello. You're listening to another episode of Inside the Techosystem. I'm your host, David Chuka, and I'm joined by my wonderful co host, Emmanuel Awotunde. I said your full name now.
Nah,
Please
it's
don't make
fine.
this a
It's
big
fine.
deal.
It's fine. It's fine. I like the fact that you added wonderful co-host. The other times
Yeah,
you just say something like this guy, that
yeah.
guy. So
I,
it's
I've
fine.
missed you, man. I've missed you, man. How have
I'm
you been?
happy. I've been actually very great. Uh,
Mm,
yeah, it's been nice actually.
mm.
Don't want to
That
get into
doesn't.
the details. So
Okay. You hit me up later. Now. That's fine.
yeah, that
All
sounds so
right.
wrong. Anyways,
Um. Well, we've not been here in a while. When last did we record? Feels like it's been a while. But we're here now, and we have a very interesting guest today. And by very interesting, I'm guessing you guys are going to find out soon. And we also have a very, very, very interesting topic today. One where we have not, I mean, hasn't been explored as much. So we're hoping we're going to explore it a lot on today's episode. I'd just like to introduce the guest first. Hey, Laulu, what's good, man?
Hi, David. Thanks for having me on the show. Hope you guys are great. Hi, Emmanuel.
hey.
Yeah, so fun facts. We have two Olaolus today. So Olaolu number one. Emmanuel, you're Olaolu number two today. Just to...
Oh, of course, of course, of course, of course. I'll take the L.
so
I'll take the L.
we're going to have Olaolu number one introduce himself and just tell us a little bit about what he does, and we're just going to kick it for there. So Olaolu, stage is yours. What's up? Introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Olaoluwa number one, and I'm a technology consultant at a Big Four, um, focused specifically on robotic process automation, short form RPA. RPA is really software technology that mimics human behavior on digital systems. And I've been doing that for about 4 years now. And it's been really exciting to see the rate of adoption grow. It's been really exciting to see people get, really interested in the technology. And being a consultant has really allowed me to make a lot of impact in the market space. So that's me, and that's what I do.
Hmm. That's an interesting intro. Like I said, interesting person, interesting episode. So I don't know if you guys heard this, but Olaolu basically does is into RPA development, right? And for people like me, you may not have heard RPA like as a word being thrown around all the time, right? And that's why we have this episode. This is actually part of our Inside the Mind series where we interview professionals in their field and ask them different questions about the field, and you just have a conversation about all the cool stuff they're working on, right? And I personally like Inside the Mind. I like episodes from the Inside the Mind series because it opens my mind a lot. Like I get to learn a whole lot. Really, like I'm
Word.
You
serious.
do
Like
that. I love it. I love it.
yeah. It's like I know it's I'm a host on the podcast, right? But
Hmm.
I'm also like a guest.
Yeah,
I know I'm like a listener on
Hmm.
the podcast. I can go back
definitely.
to any Inside the Mind episode and I can listen to. I'm like, oh wow, maybe I would even check out this career path. Looks like this is what is making bank right now. So
Yeah. I get that. You
yeah.
get to
All
you get to
right. So
listen in
now
on the conversations first.
exactly, and that's really interesting for me, right? So Laulu, we are going to start with a very commonplace question. I'm very sure you get this a lot, maybe on the numerous podcasts you have been on. I know you're a star boy. I know. You don't have to tell me.
Thanks. I
So
really
the
appreciate that.
no, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, just it's common knowledge. If nobody knows who is on the podcast, we'll put your Twitter handle.
I'm screaming. I'm screaming. I'm screaming.
All right, so the question we usually get started with whenever we have a guest is, how did you get into tech? So you basically just tell us about your career progression. What was that one thing that said, I think I want to do this for a long time or a long period in my life, right? So how did you get
Mm.
into tech, and What's the story like?
That's a very interesting question, and I think the part I like the most is you saying, "How did I decide I want to do this for a long time?" Because for a lot of things we do in life, you really do have to wait it out or see it through to reap maximum benefits from whatever you're doing, right? I do have a background in computer science. So I studied computer science, graduated sometime in 2016. And really, with the Nigerian situation of keeping 1 year of your life to do other things,
Mm-hmm.
naturally, I didn't enter the labor market until 2018. And my
Okay.
first job was really a traditional IT support role at a small, in terms of numbers of employees, financial services company. It was non-banking, meaning that it wasn't a bank, but then they did financial services. And in that company, I really got tired of going under the desk to plug cables and carrying laptops. Because I know, yes, you can't see that on the podcast, but I mean, David and I have met and that's quite tall, right?
Oh, no, no. This
So
this
it
is a
just
free
seemed
flow
like,
podcast. You can say whatever you want. You know.
yeah. So David knows that part of the story. And for me, that stressed me out a lot. And I was very lucky at the time to be asked by the CFO, the chief financial officer at the company, to do a process review for a particular department. So it was basically just him saying, go sit down with the guys, the business guys, and understand what they're doing, right? They have business operations they do every day on computers. I want to know more about what they're doing. And I did that. I sat with them for a few days and I saw that, a lot of the stuff they did was high volume, monotonous, repetitive, rule based. And
Mm,
so as someone that studied computer science, when you see all those things, you start to think, hey, I can do this with software, right?
Mm,
And that's really where that um, thing started off. And for me, after I discovered that, I had to go through the phase of deciding how I was going to build the solution for them, what I was going to do, making them see the potential value of what automating that process could look like. And the first step of that thing was to build like a minimum viable product. And the minimum viable product was a Python console app.
oh, wow.
And the Python console app, yeah, yeah. A Python console app just basically took a link to the Excel file that they were processing, right? So they used to get Excel files from their clients and they had to process those Excel files into multiple different versions for different payment systems, for different in house record keeping systems. And that really did weigh down a lot of the employees because they had to do that for hours on end and they looked drained and tired. So after getting that minimum viable product, I showed them that okay, this is the inputs, right? So after understanding the process, defining the inputs, the outputs, the business logic in between, I was able to do that, show them the value, and they were like, "Hey, we're interested in this, right?" And at that point, what that meant was I had interest in what I was building, right? There was buy-in from the stakeholders, and it was now on to me to bring this up to a bigger, better level, right? Because a console application is not something that you give business users to use. If I left the solution as a console application, what that would have
Okay.
meant in the end is that they would be coming to me each time, right?
Mm,
For
mm,
for when they want to run those files. And really, that's what a lot of traditional IT automation or IT roles back in the days were, where people learned how some of the stuffs that the business guys were doing, and then they wrote scripts that lived on their computers that did those jobs, and then
mm.
that job now became their own job. And I didn't want that for myself. I like. It's not me that is going to now be. You will now be coming to me every time to say, "Oh, please help me run this. Please help me run this."
Yeah, yeah.
And I knew that I had to empower the guys themselves to be able to do it from their computer. So the next step in that process was me deciding to make a web app, right,
Oh,
that
wow.
was hosted locally and could serve that could allow them upload the files and download the generated versions of the files on their computers. And it's really interesting because at the time, my tool of choice was Python, and even though Python wasn't a part of my university curriculum, I really like plugging this great book, Automate the Boring Stuff by Al Sweigart. I believe that's how
Yeah.
you say his last name, right? That book really did show me everything. really really did show me everything about really automating financial processes or processes in business, and then
Mm,
that led me to the Python community, engaging in the Python community, getting my employer to even pay for my attendance fee for the first conference I went for, and I really enjoyed that experience.
mhm,
And then, after that initial first phase, I think at the beginning, I just had one client's own files being processed and one payment type being processed. And obviously, for you to have impact, you need to spread that automation to the various clients and then their various payment types. So for about 8 months, I was building, different versions for the different clients and then their different payment types, and some files generated, some uploaded files needed to get about 6 files generated, some other ones had to get 4 based on business logic, right? So I really spent that time learning the processes, iterating, pushing out software to the guys and updating the versions that lived on their computer. And
mm.
it really did go a long way in significantly um impacting their process. And
Okay.
essentially, I would like to say that I literally fired myself as an IT support staff and hired
And
myself
then,
as a developer because,
Amazing.
yo,
yeah, yeah,
first man
because
in history to do that. By the way, first man in
you
history.
get first and first to that. And I'm even looking to do that again very, very soon. But I'll keep that under wraps until I succeed. So yeah, I didn't need to carry cables, go under tables anymore to plug in cables,
Mm,
carry computers anymore. And because it was a small company, of the IT department was like basically 4 people, right? And
mm. Okay.
none of them were doing software development. There was no form of leadership. I literally had to learn everything myself. There was nobody to go to apart from the internet and automate the boring stuff. But then that was really how I fell in love with automation. And then that led me to a situation where I met someone that worked at my current employer who was, doing RPA, and luckily for me, we had a conversation. It was a great conversation. One thing led to another. And you know how the transfer window goes now. I'm off to Man City,
Mm.
so let's go. And that was really,
Yo, yo,
that was really the story. That was really the
We actually
story.
had an
I,
episode called, I think, Tech Transfer Season.
Yeah,
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. You should listen to it. It's actually quite interesting. I'm
that's
curious.
amazing. Thanks a lot.
Were you doing all of this yourself? Like, the building the web app, creating the automation process. Were you doing, like, there was no help from anybody? You were just, working hard to just, like, please don't. I don't want to babysit anybody. This is what you need to do. Press this, press that. Get your work done, and then you're out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I think the great thing was I was able to find somebody in that department that was really excited by the potential of um, what we were trying to do. And she really
Okay.
understood the process. That was her job day to day for many years. Right.
Oh.
And that's a very key part of successfully automating stuff. You need to find people within various departments that are passionate about trying to improve the start or go past the status quo and really, get more out of what they can do day to day. So she
Mm.
was the one that did a lot of the knowledge transfer to me, and we worked hand in hand. So anytime I needed to review something, but then I
Yeah.
would go to her. Anytime there was an error, she would come to me. And I think at some point, she started and I know this is a software technology or a technology podcast. So
Mm.
typically you shouldn't throw up uncut exceptions to your users, right? But because there was no
Yeah.
leadership, there was no guidance, she was seeing all the error messages, right? And with time, she could read them. She could read them and
Wow.
understand what
Wow.
was going on because we had worked so close together for that period of time. So she would come to me and she'd be like, "Oh, this thing seems like this thing is doing this thing." And then I changed something in the file and I uploaded it again and it worked, right? So it
Mm,
was a
mm,
really, really exciting thing to see. And that really made me fall in love with that whole process and the whole journey of, you know, showing value, automating processes, and then delivering
Yeah.
value for the clients. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically you talked about, automating processes and all of that, right? Which makes sense, right? This is a podcast where this episode is basically talking about, RPA development and, why it's important today, right? But I'm curious because you mentioned, you did the Python console app thing, and then you also did the web app, right? To allow the employees to be able to do stuff themselves. But I'm curious because at this particular company, you were working as an IT support person, right? So
Yeah.
now, did you have these skills before? The Python web app skills, like Python skills and all of that, right? Right? Or was it something you were like, oh, I'm going to start learning so that I can do this? So were you learning on the job, or you had the skills before, and then you may have used them maybe previously, maybe not professionally, right? Because you're working as an IT support person at this company. I don't think you had to write much Python. So is it like when the opportunity came, you just harnessed the skills like, it's time to write Python, you know? So
I've
I'm
been waiting
actually
for this my whole life.
exactly. They're like, oh, I was built for this moment, man. This is my time. Or
Mm,
was this something that
mm.
you've had previous experience with, and then you just happen to be doing support at the time, right, at the IT department?
Yeah. So, for me, I did have computer science background, right? So I went through a full 4 year program and also did a final year project that I built myself using PHP. And
Mm,
it was an information management system, and PHP at the time was pretty decent, wasn't too
mm,
difficult to understand. I got the hang of it. And I think that
yeah.
confidence, led to me still feeling like I knew that I could do something, to that could be impactful. And for
Mm,
me as a consultant, now I think the most important thing, and what I did then as well, was identify the technology that allowed me implement as quick as possible and as easy as possible, right?
Mm.
mm.
Now that led to Python. That road led to Python, and because of the great
Okay.
community, because of the fact that there was literally a book that said automate the boring stuff. It wasn't
Boring
a
stuff, yeah.
learn Python the hard way. It wasn't a it wasn't a
Oh, are you
Python
taking?
advanced.
Yo,
No, I'm not
like,
taking shots. I'm not
are you
taking
taking a
shots. I'm not
shot?
taking
Okay,
shots. I'm
Oh
not
my
okay.
taking.
god.
Because
I'm not
because
taking shots. I'm just saying.
Z Shaw is savage, and Z Shaw can come for you. Actually, funny story. Learn Python the hard way was literally my own introduction to Python. It's the first book I ever read.
Yeah,
It was my own
yeah.
introduction to programming, right? So like,
And I mean, you can clearly see that you like Sufferhead now. That's why you wanted to do the hard way from the beginning. I wanted to automate the
Oh
boring
my
stuff
god.
first. So you see,
you
I
have
think
a
something
point.
that's
You have a
coming out.
point.
I think something that's coming out of this is, individual motivations, right? What was
Mm-hmm.
my motivation at the time? What was your motivation at the time? And then also the way the authors decided to name their books now resonating with different audiences, right? So it's really a storytelling or a masterclass on marketing there, but this is not a marketing conversation because I did see, the name of the book and think, okay, this is what I'm looking for, and I was willing to say, let me dedicate time to going through the process. And then the great thing about technology, especially when you're learning and doing at the same time, right?
Mm,
You get a lot more stuff done, right? And
yeah.
in no time,
Yeah.
because I was also the IT support guy, I was able to find the second monitor for myself and just put it there. And then I had one monitor
No
for
questions
my
asked. Nobody's going to ask
IDE.
you anything.
You
I'm
get,
the
and
IT
then,
guy. I'm the IT
no
guy.
questions asked. And then, you get, I just assigned myself the second monitor. There was no need for approvals. There was no need for anything. I was just like, yeah, it's mine now. And I really did get a lot of enjoyment from that role. But then, sometimes things come along, better opportunities come along, and you're just like, yeah, um, I
This
think
was
it's time
fun.
I go, right? And the thing, yeah. And then the thing about technology as well is that no technology stays installed or or in production forever, right? Technology
Mm,
advancements could come, they could find another approach, take another approach to solving that particular problem, and
mm,
your skill might no longer be needed, right? So maybe if I had stayed there for longer, my app would have been deprecated, or they would
mm.
have thrown it away, and then I would have been back to carrying computers on my head, right? So, so yeah, I think
You
everything
would
worked
return
out.
the external monitor that you carried. You return it.
So yeah, I think it all worked out well. And so and then I would like to transition to going into the new role, right? And interviewing
Mm,
for the new role, I was told that yeah, I know you've done Python, but really what we do in RPA as at that time was or the tools they used was basically .NET heavy, right? So it was C sharp and
oh,
VB, right? And I would give a
oh.
bit more context into RPA solutions and RPA tools. What they
Yeah,
really do is,
definitely.
yeah, so what RPA tools on the market or RPA vendors do is give you pre-built um, GUI, drag and drop activities, or well, that's what most of the newer guys do, right? So that you can speed up your development, right? So if you wanted to write typically if you wanted to automate something that had to do with reading a CSV file, you'd have to write code for reading your CSV file, right? But then
Okay.
if it's a GUI drag and drop elements, you just drag and drop and you're done. So what that
Yeah.
invariably meant was that I was able to automate work faster, and
Mm,
that also meant that things that I would have typically done in 8 months with traditional software programming, um, I can do it a lot faster. I think a lot of times when I talk to developers about RPA, that's really where the value is. I'm telling you that
mm,
yes, you can, talk to an API without writing any code. You can insert things into a DB without any code. You're just doing drag and drop. And then once you
mm,
understand how technology works, how everything ties in together with the process, it's literally like
mm,
drawing flow charts and placing things here and there. But then you could still use code inside, and that's why they still mention that oh, it was C sharp based, it was VB based, and
mm.
now there are a lot more tools on the market that are JavaScript based for people that are you know more drawn to that type of stuff as well. So the industry is growing.
Yeah.
Last I checked, the industry was projected to reach about $25 billion by 2020, 2025, I believe, or 2030. So it's really, really growing quickly, and yeah, there's a lot to gain here.
Mm.
Yeah,
Man,
that's a
that's
lot of
actually
things actually.
interesting. That's interesting. Yo, Laulu, you know your stuff, oh. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, would you call me on the podcast to not know my stuff?
Oh.
I
Do
mean,
you think
you
I'm
are
coming
way
here
more.
unprepared?
I love it, man. I love it. I love it. You're way more prepared than us. He knows the stuff, facts and figures. You can go head to head with anybody. I love it. I
Don't
love
quote,
it. I
don't
love
quote,
it.
don't quote me though. Don't quote me though. Do your own research. Abikilokwe.
Yeah, yeah. That's what they say on Twitter. Do your own research. I mean, enlighten yourself.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a very funny question I'm about to ask. You talked about RPA. Obviously, RPA is robotic process automation. Do you know that, like, all my life I've always thought, like, when you say robotic process, I always thought it was actual robots, like physical robots. So when people tell me they're into RPA, I was like, oh, maybe like industrial stuff, machines moving around. I
Yeah.
feel so dumb right now knowing that RPA is simply automating anything basically, which is actually, I mean, it's better because it's software,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah. I think a lot of people do have that initial misconception where they find out about it, and it makes it seem really scary when you hear that your employer wants to implement robotic process automation, and then a lot of people start saying, "Oh, am I losing my job?" There's that whole
Mm,
debate because I mean, you now have a robot that can walk and talk,
mm,
but I think for RPA, to really carve out a niche for what we were doing and the kind of technology that the vendors and the people in the industry wanted to sell, they needed to find a way to package it again. I'm going back to marketing, right? So talking about how different the technology is, putting a different nomenclature around it, so that everybody knows that okay, when you say this term, this is what you're referring to. You find a name
Mm.
that also energizes people, right? So when you say,
Mm.
we're using bots, we have about 10,000 bots in production. It's not 10,000 physical bots walking up and down doing stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Emmanuel knows that now.
10,000. Yeah, so it's 10,000 bot licenses, bot software licenses that you've deployed that can do different tasks for you. So that's pretty much it.
so
Mm.
so RPA is not necessarily a technology. It's like it's not a language, right? It can be done in any language, right? Because you mentioned you can use Python, you can use other languages, right?
Yeah, yeah. So RPA is not a language. It's I would say it's a software development methodology. Would you say methodology or technique? That kind of abstracts a lot of stuff that you would have typically had to write code for, and then also gives you that license or that user or bot account that you can now give that task to run on the system. So it's like having a virtual agent on your computer that is constantly running jobs, like on a system that is constantly running jobs. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
like that means to compare that to like product facing technologies. So for instance, there are people who build software for consumers, and
Mhm.
then so RPA is mostly for businesses, right?
Yes, mostly for businesses, but then everyday people can use it because I mean I've automated creating a playlist on Spotify, right? And that automation lives on my computer. And anytime I need a playlist on Spotify for a particular artist, right, I could just type the person's name and then the bot takes over my system and then goes to genius.com, searches for, the
Oh
artist
wow.
discography, and then he puts all of it in a Spotify playlist. And I have all the music from that
Amazing.
on
Yo, that's
Spotify. Yeah,
that's
That's
yeah.
very
amazing.
interesting
So
stuff.
so when you do so like that means you use RPA personally for your own like personal projects or like to
Of
automate
course.
automate
Yeah, of course
things
I
for
do.
yourself. So do
I
you
do.
always deploy like do you always have them like online, or do you have like a lot of web developers, for instance, we have projects on our laptops. We keep them like on local host and stuff, so we never really
Yeah,
deploy.
locally.
So I'm
Yeah.
guessing you might have to deploy some of these things so that it is truly automated, so that you don't have to
Yeah.
run commands every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And let me get a bit deeper into that. With RPA, there are two ways to go about it. Two ways to think about the bots and how they work, right? So think of them as maybe operating models or how the robots operate. And what that means in essence is that some robots are attended automations and some are unattended automations. So think of the attended automations as automations that live on your computer and run on your computer, right?
Mm.
Those ones you can kickstart it yourself. So like the Spotify one I just said was an attended automation. So I start it myself and then takes over my computer and it runs. Now the other
Okay.
half side of it are the unattended robots. Now those unattended robots, just like you've perfectly said, have a digital, like they just have their own virtual machine or a physical box somewhere that they run on, right? And they do the jobs there. So think of it as like a backend server that runs processes. So, for instance, I do have a bot is that I could say I could leave currently on as long as it's deployed on a virtual machine somewhere hosted, and the bot has triggers that work, and when it triggers, it starts and it does its job. So yeah, that's really what it is in terms of how it is in production or how you
Mm.
use it as a final user. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you. Sorry.
Go ahead,
So you
shoot,
have
shoot, shoot.
you mentioned like you have like maybe companies that also develop like RPA kind of technologies. Let's say like a marketplace where you can go download some GUI or drag and drop stuff. So those companies, for instance, and those products, how do you are they like services that live online, or you download them and then like you like modify it to your own should I say your own use case?
Yeah. So I would explain this a bit and think of the RPA tools as, because this is a traditional software talk, right? I would use IDEs, right? Think of them as IDEs, right? Development
Okay.
environments. Now
Okay.
you a company makes a development environment for a particular for their RPA products, and what you do is you go to their website and you download it, right? So some guys use physical downloads where you download it to your computer, and then you now have that development environment that allows you drag and drop, install packages, and then build out your automations that match the process that you're trying to achieve. Now, there are some other companies that have taken a different approach to it, where everything runs in your browser, so you drag and drop on your browser. So think of, I don't know if you know IFTT, if this then that, that you can, click, create triggers based on activities, stuff like that. That's pretty much right now how those softwares are typically. And the interesting thing about that is, for a very long time, big tech companies ignored that category, which was the RPA category. And that really allowed other people that were super early, super focused, capture the large share of the market, right? So the number one RPA tool is not from Google, it's not from Microsoft, it's not from Facebook, right?
Mm.
But we've seen now that those guys too have started to make significant RPA investments. So Microsoft, for instance, have bought a bunch of RPA companies to kind of build in those capacities, because Microsoft is huge and they never want to ignore a technology category that is on the rise, because they have a lot of a massive footprint in the digital ecosystem. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
for businesses that are already using Microsoft products, think
Mm-hmm.
about all the jobs that people do on Microsoft tools every day, right? How many of them can you automate, either through one way, maybe API integration? So let's assume Excel has APIs, you can use that. So they've done that with their Power Automate platform, and there's a version of that called Power Automate Cloud Flows. Now, those cloud flows are using API integrations for Microsoft products and other products that can be integrated via APIs. But then they now have a second product called Power Automate Desktop, and that is a
Mm.
version of the solution that lives on your computer and can automate even the oldest banking application that was in human history that some banks still use, or trying to work on some really, really complex things that API automation cannot achieve. So that really goes a long way to enabling a lot of companies automate and really set them on the journey of being more nimble, being more digital, and achieving a lot more efficiency. So that's pretty much it.
Mm.
Mm.
So who are the biggest players like in this space?
Yeah, the biggest players in the space right now are, I would say, number one is UiPath, right? A software
Okay.
company that started out in Romania, which is very interesting,
Okay.
right? A very small
Mm.
country. And it's grown and it's now on the stock market, it's publicly traded.
Uh,
And,
I,
that
I
tells
think
you a
I've
lot
heard of
about,
UiPath. I
yeah,
think. I
you
think.
have. Yeah. I mean, if you
Did
haven't, then, then they are doing something wrong.
Well, I haven't.
yeah. Of course.
I
Of
guess,
course. Of
and
course, you haven't.
drag him, drag him. So
I mean, he came here
that was
thinking
the number.
we're going to talk about robots. So I
Mhm.
mean, just look at him. Look at him.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good to have a simple mind. Like you get to
Yeah,
learn more
I
stuff.
do
So
agree. I do agree.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I'd say that those guys are clearly the leaders in the space. They've captured a massive chunk of the market. But then
Mm.
something very interesting was when I started out my career in 2019, that wasn't the case. Sorry, in 2019, that's correct. In 2019, that wasn't the case. They weren't the leaders. There was another software company that was very, very popular for unattended robots, meaning that, again, they live on back-end systems, they had their own computers they could work on. And
mm,
a lot of banks, a lot of insurance companies, a lot of telcos that had back-end processes just implemented that. But then, with the world we live in today, and with companies that are really, really focused on product development and making their products a lot more quick and better, UiPath was able to surpass them by integrating more things into their solution. Rather than just RPA alone, they created like a
Mm-hmm.
whole suite that serves you different products that are very, very critical to the automation journey. And RPA is just one part of it. There are other
Mm,
parts story.
that's amazing. Like the
That's
other time you
that's
said
very interesting.
Microsoft just bought a bunch of companies. I mean, it's only a few companies can do that. Like
Yes.
bought a bunch of RPA companies.
Yeah.
Bill
Yeah, of
Gates is a
course. So
gangster
what
now. What do
Microsoft
you
did was they bought a bunch of different companies that, one was RPA, one was another intelligent automation offering, and then they are now tying everything into, just like UiPath has their own suite of intelligent automation. So intelligent automation is like the bigger brackets, and then RPA
Mm.
is like a smaller circle inside of it.
I
So,
know about data science, like how in data science we do something called ETL, extract, transform, and load. And I know there's a bit of automation that goes on there. Have you, in your career, ever worked with like maybe large amount of data or working with something that is similar to data science, maybe RPA tools like helping out in data science also?
or artificial intelligence even, because I
Yeah.
feel like,
Even
when you
yeah.
were working at the IT support thing, you did your own basic form of robotic process automation. Like you just said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let me just automate this, and you just. But in my mind, I'm like, I think the big players out there, right, when they're about to do their own RPA, they bring like their data guys, their AI guys, and like, yo, we're
Mm-hmm.
about to, RPA the hell out of this thing. So so I want to know if right now I know you're doing consultation, right? You're consulting and stuff. I want to know if at your company maybe you guys also take into consideration, adding some form of AI and ML and all of that into your process.
Yeah, so I'll tie everything back to, the last point I made about intelligent automation, right? So in intelligent automation, RPA, again, like I said, is just a subset. Now, in that same circle, you have ML, you have AI, you have process intelligence, which is really using artificial intelligence to figure out processes based on um, digital logs. So, for instance, an application has logs. You go through all the logs digitally, intelligently, and then you pretty much create flows and allow people see what is happening in the backend systems that generated all those logs. And so it's a really, really huge. Think of it. I don't want to call it a metaverse, but it's like a huge it's a huge ecosystem of different technologies that have come together to make RPA a lot more reliable and allow it do more, right? So go
Mm,
beyond just the basic rules that RPA
mm,
started out as. And that has meant that for companies really thinking about taking automation to the next level, you really do
yeah.
have to start thinking of your AI strategy. You really start thinking of, data strategy as well, because all those things tie in together, right? So for instance, if you think about common businesses that might need a service like this, they're typically big. They typically have a lot of employees, because when you hear a company has a lot of employees, what comes to your mind should be they have a lot of processes. Because if you didn't have a lot of processes, you wouldn't need a lot of people, right? So you have a
Mm,
lot of people, and then you also have a lot of customers. And those
mm,
customers, at the end of the day, every single touch point leaves a digital footprint in a company that has significant technology investments. So for banks, for telcos, for government agencies, you can see the number of records skyrocketing, into the millions,
mm,
right? And based on the business logics, just like I said at the beginning, where one file came in as just one file, but you had to generate six files, right? You could have a system where one entry in one system needs to translate into three entries in another system. And that
Mm.
really
mm,
does mean that there's a lot of heavy lifting there. So maybe not right now, as of today in Nigeria in this space, right? So maybe not data science yet, more of data engineering, right?
Okay.
Where
Okay.
ETL, just like you said, comes in. I
Okay.
have worked with a couple of ETL tools to help out with cases where we come across really, really bad data sets that we needed to do a lot of transformation on. So that's that as well. And then for the AI and machine learning part of it, I would say yes. A lot of the machine learning um, professionals are more geared towards software development, adding intelligence to products, and using artificial intelligence for good and human development. But then for
Mm.
a lot of the companies here locally, a bit of context, we're in Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
For your global audience that is listening in, um, a lot of the maturity around those processes and the need for intelligence hasn't gotten to where we need it to be. And so
Okay.
it means that there's still a second wave coming. The RPA
Yeah.
is right
Second
now
wave,
leaning.
please. Oh.
Not that kind of wave. Not the pandemic kind of wave.
uh,
But yeah, it's a second wave. The first wave was RPA. The second wave would be, intelligent automation, where
Mm.
artificial intelligence, machine learning, optical character recognition, are
mm,
all brought in to significantly improve the processes and take them off
Mm.
people that really, really hated them in the first place.
Mm.
mm,
I am very curious. I am very curious. This, in fact, like I'm sold right now. Like this is actually very interesting stuff. And on this podcast, we like to relate almost everything we talk about to the tech ecosystem. I mean, it's called Inside the Tech Ecosystem for a reason. And our tech ecosystem right now is Nigeria, right? And I'm going to be very honest. Laulu, you're the first RPA person I know. So I like
Interesting.
to
That's
know
that's
why. I like
interesting.
to know why there's not a lot of hype around it in
Yeah.
Nigeria, in the Nigerian tech ecosystem. Like why are we not like saying, oh, I want to get into um software development, or I want to get into tech, and someone just says, oh, look, why not check out RPA? I'm very sure you could have a lot of impact in different industries. So why do you think there's not a lot of hype around it right now as a tech ecosystem,
Yeah.
coming up?
And I think the very simple answer to that question is it's currently being used in business, right? By
Okay.
businesses that
mm,
have processes for them, internal processes that they can't talk about, right?
Okay.
Because
Okay.
if you talk about the process, you might be giving away some confidential information, right? So
Yeah.
the people benefiting most from it are not coming out every day to say, oh, we are using RPA, we are using RPA,
mm,
right?
Oh,
But then
okay.
I think there was a point where it did happen, and that was as far back as 2018, where a bunch of a particular company decided to do some PR runs around some of the digitizations that they were able to do with RPA. And that led to a snowball effect of other people being interested, other people
Mm,
finding out how they could do the same thing within their organizations. And again, because I said, it's for businesses, typically what happens is somebody decides they want to do an RPA initiative. They call in,
mm,
RPA consultants or
mm,
yeah, they call it RPA consultants to help them start off the process. And typically, what now happens there is because yes, RPA is somewhat of a has related skills to software development, right?
yeah.
What happens is those consultants coming there and the companies would now say, okay, you were working as a software developer before, yeah, go and join them, go and see RPA, right? So
Mm.
these people were people that they've seen both sides of the story, and then some people decide, okay, I think I want to do RP. I think this is where I want to go, and then it's still within their ecosystem, right? That whole career
Yeah.
transition has happened. It's still within their ecosystem. They haven't gone out
Yeah.
to give a talk about how they transition to RPA, right?
Wow.
that's a
Because
lucky
Wow.
shade.
Laul is coming for everybody on this
zero
podcast, and
shade, zero
all I have
shade.
to say is I have no involvement in this. I'm so sorry.
Oh my
Stray
god.
bullets left and right. I do not know what's happening. So-
So it's not as glamorous as a lot of the other. So that's why it doesn't have the hype. But I'll tell you
yeah.
that one thing it does have is the impact, right? And I'll
Mm,
tell you
mm,
from a people's perspective, and this is very something very important. I think everybody should listen into this part, right? When people or companies decide to embark on RPA journeys, there are employees that take time out to understand why they're doing RPA, the how of doing RPA. They really do get to see a very, very huge growth in their career, right? Now, I'll give you two examples. First example is somebody that or someone that I met as a business user, just like in my first job where we had business users that I had to interact with, right?
okay.
They started out there, they got really close to the project, they understood a lot of things that was happening there, and then they were able to transition into a situation where they became a business analyst, now no longer at their desk job, but now interfacing between the people building the RPA solutions and their former colleagues, trying to understand the process, trying to tell them, okay, we can automate this one, right? So
Yeah.
that significantly improves that
That makes
person's
a lot of
earning
sense,
potential.
actually. That makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense. Yeah.
yeah. That significantly improves the person's potential. And then for people
Mm-hmm.
that were traditionally developers, especially in Nigerian banks that traditionally transition rather to becoming RPA developers, the
Hmm.
fact that they got that interest, they built the skill, and again, it's a very small industry. How many banks do you have in Nigeria, right? So the trend
Mm,
we saw in that space, or I saw in that space, was they started doing pass around, right? You work
mm.
here for 1 year, you go to another
They
place, collect
transfer
salary
you.
increase, work for another year, right? Go to another place, collect salary increase, right? So the
Yeah.
literally that multiplier effect has really skyrocketed earnings of a lot of people. And I think
Hmm.
maybe there's some um, vested interest in keeping it niche, right, and not opening it up as much to ensure
Mm,
that the people that have the skills can make the maximum benefit. Maybe that's why people
yeah.
don't talk about it.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that's really the opposite of what we should be doing, right? We should be evangelizing. We should be having communities. We do
Mm.
have
Another one.
communities. We do that. No, that's not shade. That's something that the software development community is doing
Sounds like
really
shade,
well.
Sha. Sounds like
It's
shade.
not.
Sounds
It's
like
not.
shade.
It's not.
Evangelizing,
I,
man.
It's not. It's not.
don't mind the
So
man,
so
oh. Don't mind the man, oh.
so we
I
do
feel
have
you. I feel you.
we do have communities in Nigeria as well, for those
Okay.
different RPA vendors, right?
Okay.
And things are getting really really big on the continent of Africa because again, unfortunately, a lot of times Africa is slow to technology, right? So the Western
Yeah.
world is already doing intelligent automation, and here RPA is only just kicking off, right? So it means
Yeah.
that the people building skills here for RPA at this time can still catch up to the people that have been doing RPA for the past 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And then they'll be stuck in that job. So they can come in, break the ceiling, and still match those people, reduce
Hmm.
the number of passing around that is going on. But then for people that
Yeah.
have been in the space for quite a while, they need to go past that initial phase of just RPA and put something else on top of it. So maybe you're now doing intelligent automation. Maybe you've grown significantly in your career and you've taken on um, more important work like managing projects, becoming a key stakeholder, climbing the career ladder within your organization thanks to the impact you were able to make with RPA. Because I know it's not something we've touched on yet, but then the return on investments for a lot of company in that invest in the technology is huge, right? So a lot of the people there have said, so imagine coming to your boss and saying, hey, see, all the things I've done in the past year have saved the company XYZ billion, right? Why am I not
Mm,
getting a salary raise? Right?
yeah.
It's
That's a valid
a much
argument.
Yeah.
it's a much easier conversation to make. And
Yeah.
then so that really helped a lot of people as well in that space. And it's exciting to see.
So from the way I see
Yeah.
it, it seems like RPA can also be used internally by a company that makes RPA technologies.
Definitely.
That is a very very good one you've pointed out there, Emmanuel. I think for companies that sell technology, I've always felt like you using your product yourself, apart from companies that are I'm sorry, B2C, yeah, apart from companies that are B2C, using your own
Mm,
product is very important because it allows you test the extent to which the technology you yourself are building can go. And
mm,
UiPath, which again, like I said, is the leader in the space, actually do have their own teams within their own company automating stuff, right? So for instance, my own company as well, we could have another team within my company automating things or things in my company because my company has operations that I need to run, and
Yeah.
RPA too can come in there as well. So you really
Mm.
do need to taste your own pudding before you give it to someone else to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Word, word, word.
Yeah.
Mm,
All right.
yeah.
So I'm curious about, you mentioned that like you're an RPA consultant, right? And you also talk about RPA developers. So is it are they like two different things? Does consultation also involve you doing developing work, like maybe writing RPA code, I'm going to assume, right? Or
Mm,
consultation is just, you go to a business and you could try and figure out if they really need RPA, or, just
yeah.
try and understand their needs. So, if are they different things entirely, or
Mhm.
are they just words that can be used interchangeably? And what's like the day in the life of an RPA developer or an RPA consultant when you think about it?
Okay. That's very interesting. I'm really excited for this one. So,
Yeah.
RPA consultants are traditionally, again, technology consulting or consulting just means you understand something, somebody doesn't understand it, and they are willing to pay you for that service,
Mm.
right?
Sounds like a
Depending on the
sweet
terms of
deal.
it does. I mean, you remember all those people saying that information is power. It really is. That's what consulting is.
Yeah,
That's really what
yeah,
it's built on,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
So what now happens in that instance is it really depends on the client you go to and the skills the clients have within their organization. If the client is lacking, they don't understand what RPA is, they don't even know where to start, and at that point you could start off there. That's where you can start, right? If they decide, okay, we need developers. Well, I also happen to know how to build RPA technology. You can call me a RPA developer. Yeah, send me money, no problem.
Mm.
Right?
Mhm.
That's really
Okay,
what technology consulting. And I know David. David probably loves that part of it. I'm sure his eyes are lighting up.
bruh. I mean, it's only natural. I mean, I'm an Igbo boy. But go on, go on. That's besides the point.
And then what now happens is for an RPA consultant, you could fit into any aspect or segment of the life cycle of of the job. But then you could also go further to specialize. You could say you're an RPA business analyst. You could say you're an RPA project manager. You could say you're an RPA developer. You can say you're an RPA senior developer. You can say you're an RPA support engineer. You can say you're so there are so many roles, right? So RPA is
Mm.
not just one thing and it's not
Yeah.
just tied to one role. There's so many roles underneath the garment of people are building skills to hit those roles. And then for a day in the life of an RPA developer, a day in the life of an RPA developer is very, very similar to the day in the life of a software developer, where you have things you're trying to build to achieve a
Yeah.
business goal, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you have it, listed out in an Excel sheet. Maybe you have it listed out on a Kanban board or
Yeah.
something like that, right? And you have those different tasks broken down into, chunk size actions that you need to tick off. And then you take your RPA tool of choice within your organization or within your practice if you're independent, and then
Mm.
figure out how to solve that problem. And then once you solve that problem by building the process, as a developer, typically your job is done. You've built it,
Mm.
you've tested it,
Mm.
and it's good, right? It checks out, the business logic matches. And then in some instances, you have people that are RPA testers that test it, and then you can have somebody else deploy the solution into production. So you can decide you want to have the whole view of it, or as a consultant, right? Or be it just a developer or a specialized role that only pertains to a particular thing. Now, the career trajectory for the two roles are different. I haven't gotten to the roles of a consultant yet, a day in the life of a consultant, but I'll get to that shortly, right?
Yeah.
The career projection is different. So for an RPA developer, you definitely just maybe do an RPA developer one, RPA developer two, senior RPA developer, RPA architect. Maybe you get lucky, they think you're a good fit for leadership. They make you
Mm.
RPA engineering manager, right?
Okay.
And then at the top of the chain, you now become an RPA, maybe product owner. So now you're the product owner of RPA within your
Mm.
organization, or a technical lead.
Mm.
And
Okay.
for software developers, you can see that that is really the same. The career ladder is the
Yeah.
same, right?
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
Mm.
agree? Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So
For
Yeah,
sure.
so makes
for
sense.
for RPA consultants, a day in the life is more of interacting with business teams, trying to sell the division of RPA to leadership at the C-suite level, right? And really, yeah, really ensuring that the RPA investments, or the companies make the most of their RPA investments. So it's up to an RPA consultant to ensure that his clients are at the forefront of technology,
Yeah.
updating when things are needed to be updated, checking for latest things that their clients could benefit from. So on the consultation level, you're doing a lot more high level work. You're doing a lot more visioning. You're doing a lot more roadmap, direction, right? What are the plans, right? Finding people that fit into the ecosystem that could help you maybe build, maybe help different parts of the aspect.
Mm.
And then for that, the career projection looks like this, right? RPA consultant, one maybe consultant, associate RPA consultant, senior RPA consultant, right? RPA consultant, manager, right? Manager to a manager, just like you have an engineering manager, but for the technical side or the delivery side. And then
Mm.
the thing with the consulting role is that for consultants, there's a path to C-level for you, right? Where you end up becoming. I think a lot of companies have different nomenclatures,
Becoming an
but then
Oga.
you now become a chief automation officer, right?
Mm.
So you
Okay.
become a CAO, right? And that's a
Mm.
sweet position. So if you think about
Mm.
the sizes of companies and where people tend to hit the ceiling in terms of you know career trajectory, I would say that as a consultant, I think the bar is higher. There's a lot
Mm.
higher up you can go to within the organization, and then if you're really passionate about the cause, I don't think you know nothing stops you from transitioning from being the chief automation officer to being the CEO if you decide that, oh, he's the
Ah.
best man for the job. You decide that you're about to
This
see
sounds
best
like a
school.
coup.
It
What do you
sounds
say?
like they are doing. It sounds like
It
they're
sounds
doing
like
the
a coup.
coup.
Well, it does. It does. I just painted that picture to show that once you hit C-suite, right, it's
Yeah.
then left to you to decide if you still want to stay in this role where you have the executive presence, right? Another
Yeah.
company can be an RPA company and decide, okay, we need this person as a chief executive officer rather than just
Yeah.
a CAO, right? Because they spent time in the industry, they have strong opinions about certain things, and there's definitely a lot of um, direction and leadership that they can bring that just a developer or a technical lead might not be able to bring. So that's really
Mm.
why that's really where the difference comes in.
So it's like a product. It's like being a RPA consultant is similar to being a product manager in like product facing companies.
Yeah, it could be that, and then it could also be similar to being a program manager sometimes as well, depending on
Mm.
where the company is structured. So yeah.
Makes sense. So in the industry of like RPA stuff, like your own journey into RPA is not really the typical one, I guess. Is there a simple roadmap, like a way people, let's say I want to become an
Mhm.
RPA developer today? Is there a roadmap in which I need to do this, do that, maybe take a few courses, get a
Yeah,
certification, or
yeah.
Yeah.
what's the roadmap like for RPA?
Yeah.
And
I'm actually curious about the certification part because it feels like software devs now would
mhm.
we pick a course on Udemy, which
Yeah.
will never finish, build a couple of projects,
Mhm.
but it feels like for RPA, you need to have a certificate because I feel like people would ask, "Oh, okay, what are your certifications?" Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think
Because
I
it seems
recently
like
saw
there's
something
a
in your
lot of
LinkedIn.
standards in it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I recently saw something on your LinkedIn where you got a certification for something. I'm not really sure. So is that like is
Yeah.
that really important? Like no certification, no work for you, something like that, right?
No sati.
I'm screaming. I love that. So I think this is one part where RPA needs to learn a lot more from software development, and this is one is a shade, right? You wake up in the
Mm,
morning and you're saying 13 things, or your TL, you're saying 13 things you need to learn to become a web developer in 2022. We've told you one,
Just
two,
13, oh.
three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, only 13, right? But then yes, a lot more RPA developer people are also breaking into that space and sharing more. But then I would say the
Mm,
path is really understanding where you are, understanding your skills, right? So Emmanuel, what's your strength? David, what's your strength? Is it you're very good at programming? Is it you're a very good communicator? Is it that you have a lot of empathy? In fact, if you see the devil today, you have empathy for him, right? So so have understanding where you are, right, and then just having a basic understanding of the technology and then the different roles and seeing where you can fit in and leverage your strengths. Now, for some people, that is, being an RPA developer because they're good at building, they have a good handle of, programming. For some people, it's being something called an RPA citizen developer, where
mm,
you're also building, but as a citizen, what citizen effectively means in this situation is that you're not you don't have a computer science background, you don't really have a strong grasp of programming, but then RPA companies have given you a simplified version or a simpler version with a lot more simpler language. And one
mm,
example, I'll go back to UiPath because it's one of my favorite tools to work with, right? So for the RPA developers and people that work in technology, if I tell you, okay, you need to save this thing into a variable, you understand instantly what I mean, right? Because it's terminology that you're used to. But then for somebody
familiar with, yeah.
that's never taken CS50, right?
Mm,
For somebody who has never taken CS50 and has never taken a programming course in their life, they don't know what a variable is, right? So
mm,
on the citizen developer edition, what they would say is, do you want to save whatever data, you save it for later, right? And that is simple English that anybody can understand.
yeah,
And that's really what a variable is, right? Saving it
yeah.
for later. And that
Mm.
has really led to a lot of people, even in their 50s and in their 60s transitioning to becoming RPA citizen developers because then they have maybe 40 years of experience doing one particular thing. But then because of the low barrier to entry, they've been able to
Yeah,
take on automation to do those things that they were doing before. And then
yeah.
what that has now led to is a lot more people getting involved, companies being able to do more, increasing the productivity of the employees, making a lot more people happier. So once you
Mm,
understand your strengths, you understand basics of the technology, you see where you want to fit in. The next thing is education, right? Really understanding to a deep level what you want to do. And the fantastic thing is because these guys are publicly traded, trying to make as much cash as they can make for their investors, right? They've
mm,
created really, really good academy platforms or online learning platforms that are free, right?
Mm.
And all the learnings are structured. So learnings are structured according to, roles, right? So if you're an RPA developer, you want to be an RPA business analyst, all those
yeah, that's
things are
interesting.
listed according to
Yeah.
roles. So you don't need to you can go to Udemy for, you know, I would
I
say
feel a shady story.
alternative content, but then on their academy on their academic platforms, they already have official trainings listed out, provided by the
Okay,
vendor themselves. And the great
okay.
thing about those trainings are, and I spend a lot of time doing those trainings and even taking up trainings that I've already done before because a lot of the knowledge there is not just tool specific, right? So it's not just
Yeah,
UiPath, it's not just Microsoft.
yeah.
It's really
Okay.
soft. A lot of the information there has a lot of learnings around soft skills. So you tend to
That's
find out that
interesting.
somebody that is very, very, into RPA development and really upskilling would have a lot more soft skills than maybe their peer that is just a a traditional programmer that his own is just they've given me a task. I'm looking at the
Mm,
tickets. The only person I talk to is my manager, right?
mm.
And
Another
that's
shade.
oh shit,
It's
that's
fine. It's
shade,
fine.
that's shade. Oh shit, that's shade.
That one is fine. That one is fine. That one is fine.
It's fine. No,
and
we agree.
and
We agree. We agree.
and then that leads to ensuring that because you need to have a lot of empathy because you're really at the end working for people and meeting a lot of people and having massive impact in people's lives, right? It's really really rewarding. So go get on those academy platforms. They're totally free. And then
Mm,
the next part is after you're on the academy, you need to be able to access the software, right? Another fantastic thing is UiPath community is also free.
yeah. So
UiPath
the academy,
community
do you
is
have
also
a
free.
can you mention a couple like UiPath or are there others
So
apart
so
from that?
UiPath has an academy. Blue Prism, which is the company I alluded to earlier that was previously the leaders, they call
Okay.
theirs a university, but it's also
Okay.
a platform where you can learn. So just pick
Mm,
a tool to start out with. You don't need to fall in love with that tool on first go. My first tool
Yeah.
isn't the tool that I'm currently using at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So things change, times
Yeah.
change. You might need to
Mm-hmm.
adjust. One time somebody's leading, another person can take over, another person can take over, and then you need to be very very um particular about staying up to date about the trends, observing those trends, seeing where the leaders who analysts think are the leaders in this space, because the leaders are the ones that are going to give you the most value for your money because they're the ones that have more projects. They're the ones that would have more job openings on LinkedIn. People
Yeah.
would ask a lot more for their skills.
Yeah.
And then if you decide to after that, you should get certified, right? I think the
Yeah.
first UiPath certification that you can get, I'm sorry again, I keep going back to UiPath because I really, really, I'm really, really a big fan of what they do. And I mean,
Yeah.
try to be a very active member of
That's
the
okay. That's
community,
okay. That's okay.
right?
mm,
Is that, I believe the first certificate you can get is an RPA developer associate, right?
Mm.
And that's training, I think you can take it 6 months after 6 months into your RPA journey, right? So regardless of whether you're at a company, regardless of whether you completed the training at home, right, when you are waiting for school to be back in session, right, you can do that and then learn and then put it on your CV. And then if the chance ever comes up, you meet someone, you apply to an RPA job, it does increase your chances of getting that job. So yes, certifications are important sometimes, right? Because they
Yeah.
credentialize the skills you have. But then certifications can also be used as some form of virtue signaling, right? And that is why, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing because it just shows
Mm.
that, okay, I believe that this thing is important right now. I'm
Yeah.
investing time to learn this thing, right? And then I'm showing people out there that, hey, I'm learning this thing, right? Because I know what is coming next. I know what is happening next. And then it leads to a
mm.
lot of conversations. I think for me, for instance, my professional social media, LinkedIn, is used, really to stir up a lot of conversations. I love it when people come to me
Yeah.
and say, their company is thinking of starting an RPA project, right?
Mm.
When people come to me and say they're thinking of learning RPA, love it when people come to me and say, they're confused about picking a role that best
Mm-hmm.
suits them. And having those conversations, I found it very, very meaningful and I found it
Mm.
very engaging. So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really the whole picture.
Yeah.
Mm.
We're
That's
actually
that's a
going to
very
link. We're going to link Laulu's professional social media and LinkedIn to this too, because Laulu has a social media that is not professional, but we're going to link the professional one. All right, man, this has actually been very eye-opening,
yeah.
enlightening to say the least, and I've learned a lot actually. And we're so glad that we had you on this episode to talk about this. In fact, we already know that you're passionate about this because you've just been going
Yeah,
on and
like
on.
you can basically hear it.
Yeah, right. And so
Thanks for
basically,
having me, guys.
man, we're so glad you came on. We're so glad we came on. We've
yeah.
come to the end of the episode, basically, but we usually like to, we start the episode with a question. How did you get into tech? And we usually like to end the episode with another question whenever
Is it how I'm going
guests
to get
come on
out
the
of
show.
tech?
No, 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 no. You can share that wherever you want. Not on our podcast, please. Don't put us inside trouble. But the question we usually like to ask is, what would you be doing if you were not in tech? If you were never the IT support guy, if you never had to write your
Mm,
first Python console app, what would you be? What is your real actual, a dream job, or dream life?
mm,
If you never had to
mm,
do anything technical related.
mm. So the thing is, I never really had a dream job, right, or a
Mm,
dream career. I would say that in 2016 when I left uni, I was in a leadership type thing with a small cohort of people with a lecturer, and he was like, "Write down where you want to be in 5 years." And I mean, 5 years have passed, right? And an RPA
mm,
consultant. Who wants to guess
yeah,
what I wrote on the paper? Was it RPA consultant?
like
Of
Of
course
course
lie.
not.
not. Of course not. So at the time, I wanted to be an animator, and I spent a
Oh
lot of
wow.
time
Aww.
in After Effects, Illustrator, and I mean, I'm not really sure if I would have had a successful career there. But then you never know. You
You
never
never
know,
know. Actually,
right?
you never know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the great thing about life is you can always go back to your old interests when you have enough
Yeah,
free time. So
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
that as well.
Man, that's interesting. I also had animation dreams, but I'm here hosting a
You
podcast.
still have it. You still
Crush,
have
I still have it. I
crush.
still have it.
I love it. I'm
Anyway,
glad you still have it.
yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to link all the, things you mentioned in the show notes, and and people can also reach out to Laulu on his professional social media or LinkedIn if they have more questions about, RPA development and consultation. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Remember, we release new episodes every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. If you would love to connect with us, you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Inside the Techos, or subscribe to our newsletter and shoot us an email at insidethetechosystem@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners. You can follow the host on Twitter as well, Chuka at Siwadiogu and Emmanuel at Olaoluwa_98. All right, see you in the next one.